Welcome everybody to the latest session on streaming, dreaming tech, and welcome to you wherever you're joining us from. It'd be great to know wherever you're joining us from. There is a live poll for you to just tell us where you're joining from. It'll be great using the Slido link. Today we have got a great session where we're covering all about the differences between virtual cameras, what type of cameras there are out there, as in what the software is that you can use to drive your virtual sessions. Before we get on to there and why you're filling in the information of where you're joining us from, I'd like to introduce you to our panel tonight and the number of the people on the panel. So first up on our panel tonight, we have Marty.
Hi, Leo. How you doing? Wonderful to be here. Thank you so much. I'm in Silver Spring, Maryland. I'm an audio engineer, video engineer, communications engineer. Been doing this for quite a while now, and I'm happy to assist.
Great. Next up on the panel, we have Joanne, or J-Lo.
J-Lo, because it's Joanna.
Joanna, sorry, I do. You know when you say something and your head goes, that's just doesn't sound right.
It wasn't
J-Lo,
right.
J-Lo,
Yeah,
J-Lo.
Jojo, whatever you want is fine. It's nice to be here. Thanks for inviting me, Leo. I am joining you from Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. I'm a former choir director for Unitarian Universalist Fellowship and now virtual choir maker and content creator and audio engineer, and very, very much interested in this subject that you explore every week. So thanks.
Thank you. The next up we have is Rabbi David Paskin.
Hi there. And while I'm doing this, can you do me a favor and spotlight the Slido link? A couple people in the chat are asking.
Yeah, I will do that. Absolutely. Yep, it's up there. Yeah, keep talking, David, and we will.
Hi, I'm David, your Torah Tech Guy, and I'm based in Florida, and I'm looking forward to learning together today.
And then finally, and we're going to take that out, the spotlight out. And I'm going to ask John to introduce himself.
Hi, John from beautiful Monterey, California, and I took the green screen down so you could see me in my natural environment. I am going to have to leave a little early, so it's not out of a lack of interest, but I have a task or two that I have on my schedule.
John, it's interesting to be able to see, as you say, you've taken the green screen down and see there that's what's behind you. Wow, it's busy room.
Well, I wasn't planning on that, but I realized I didn't have the green screen up, and then you were talking about cameras, and this is what you see if you don't have a green screen behind you, at least in my house.
I think that's always a really interesting discussion about the difference between seeing green screens and not seeing green screens. I'm not using a green screen, and I apologize. I know I'm out of sync. Before we get on to David discussing his bit and his things, Marty, are you on a green screen? Can you explain your background?
Nope, this is actually real physical stuff. This is my museum of microphones and mixers and other devices that I used when I was doing portable work, where I had to wear all the equipment on my body. Everything had to be small and miniaturized. Now I don't do that so much, so it's here.
And for anybody who's watching, we will be having questions. The questions are on that Slido link. So if you can put in the link, that you'll see that link there, and fill in that's the easiest way to ask questions, the audience Q&A questions. And you can vote up and vote down questions as they come in. So I'm going to stop the live polls. We're showing Slido because this is actually something you could be using in your services in the future, so they'll be able to bring in, when you've got people remote and you've got people in the room, they can all use Slido to the same level. Last person actually who's just joined us on here just at the last minute into the panel is John. And you just introduce yourself, John.
Hi, John. I'm John. I've been on once before. I live in London, and I'm involved with live streaming and primarily an audio engineer, but I've learned to do a lot of camera stuff in the last year.
Great. So we're going to hand over to this first session to David. If you've got any questions, please use the link of Slido to put in, and we'll be asking the questions afterwards. So I'm handing it over to you, David. Away you go. and you
I know,
started
I know,
with
I know, I
the
know. I really need to get one of those "You're muted" mugs. Hi, everybody. It's good to see you. My name is David. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen because I want to share with you. I know it doesn't look like I'm sharing my screen, but I am, I promise. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how screen sharing can be a little bit different depending on what you're presenting. So I want to share with you today video production for Ploni. And for those of you who know, Ploni is sort of a generic name in the Gemara about sort of your average person. So I'm not going to get deep into the weeds here. I just want to show you some of what I've learned over the past few months. So we're going to talk a little bit about streaming software, virtual cameras, graphics, lower thirds, overlays, and slides. We're going to do all of that incredibly quickly. One of the first things I want to point out is that there are really two ways to do this video production work in your synagogues, in your temples. There's a hardware version or approach and a software approach. So some of you may be using an Ecamm Mini or an Ecamm Mini Pro, or now the Ecamm, what do they call it? The Extreme, the Ecamm Extreme, which is basically a hardware video encoder. You take all of your camera sources, you plug them in. It allows you to do overlays and bring in slides and things like that. It's a hardware version of, or a hardware tool to use to do video production. The other option is to do a software version, which is what I use. The version that I use is called Ecamm Live. It's not the only one out there, and we're going to mention a couple of the other options in a moment. But before we do that, I just want to distinguish between streaming and meeting. So a lot of synagogues for a long time have been streaming their services, and they've been streaming them to Facebook or to YouTube, basically setting up a camera in their sanctuary and just sending out a signal of whatever they have been doing for the people in the sanctuary to the people at home. The next step, though, is to switch over from streaming to meeting. Now, not necessarily leaving Facebook and YouTube, but to engage with your audience differently, but using some of the video production tools in order to do that. And of course, we're all familiar with Zoom, maybe Google Meet. You might use different meeting tools to accomplish that. So what's what? Let's break this down a little bit. So what is streaming production? Well, streaming production, it's basically using hardware or software that allows for the creation of high quality video for streaming to online platforms like Facebook or YouTube. Sometimes you'll want to use this streaming software in the context of a meeting. And for that, you'll need something called a virtual camera. So they're not the same thing, but you can use streaming software as into a virtual camera, which will bring that production into your Zoom or into your Google Meet or into really almost any program that uses a webcam. So you use the output from your video production software, your streaming software, and use that as a virtual camera into your meeting program. There are some really basic virtual cameras that you can use. You don't need to go and dive into video production, really. So for example, one of them is called Prezi Video. Prezi Video is a neat little tool. Some of you may have used Prezi in the past. It creates sort of these moving, engaging presentations, more than just what you might find in Keynote or PowerPoint or Google Slides. It allows you to be interactive with the presentation. You can zoom in, you can zoom out, you can move around. What Prezi Video does is it essentially takes a presentation, turns it into an overlay, puts it on top of your video, and then allows that to become, again, your virtual camera. So if you're using this in a meeting or something like that, you would use the Prezi Video as your virtual camera. There's also an app called Ecamm, which definitely wins the prize for the best name, which is a similar type of application. It's presentation based. Leo doesn't like it. I'm getting a head shake from Leo.
I don't like the name. It's the name. I can't pronounce the name, but I like the product.
Okay, all right. So it's a presentation-based piece of software that you can use as a virtual camera. And then there's an application called Ecamm, which kind of straddles, I think, the virtual camera and the streaming software. It's kind of a, at least in my experience, a very basic stream video production piece of software. It doesn't have all the bells and whistles that you might find in something like OBS or Ecamm Live or vMix, but it's a good place to start if you're just kind of diving into this. And then there's actually full-fledged streaming production pieces of software. So the one that I use is called Ecamm Live. There's also vMix, which is PC-based. So Ecamm Live is only Mac-based. vMix is only PC-based. And then there's OBS. OBS is cross-platform. It's also open source, which means it's free. Ecamm Live, I believe, is the most expensive of the three. I think vMix is only like $60 or something. I could be wrong about that. Someone correct me. I'm a Mac guy. But Ecamm Live is a yearly subscription. It's a few $100 every year for the pro level subscription. OBS is completely free and open source, which means that it's always innovating. In my experience, it also means that there's a very steep learning curve to OBS. It's entirely possible that's just because I'm stupid, but unless you're willing to put the time into it, you may find yourself better off with some of these other applications. Although I will say that both vMix and Ecamm also take a good bit of learning to dive into. Before I show you kind of behind the scenes of Ecamm, I also wanted to talk for just a moment about graphics, because a big piece of all of this video production, in fact, what you're seeing right now is sort of the box around me, and then the box around my keynote presentation, and then the little graphic down below. That's all created in a graphics program that I'm then bringing in as an overlay. One of the ways to think about video production, again, for me, is to think in layers, right? So you've got what's the bottom layer? So for me, the bottom layer right now is actually the kind of the colored outline. And then I've got my video on top of that. I've got my keynote on top of that. And then I've got that little thing that keeps popping up in the bottom here on top of that. So using different graphics programs to create these overlays or these frames or these different elements that pop in and out. I'm going to give you two really simple ones. By the way, one of the things that you should know about me is that I don't really know what I'm doing. I use simple tools and I watch other people use them, and then I learn from that. So I'm not going to be using anything fancy schmancy here, but Canva is a fantastic tool for creating graphics. I've created a lot of graphics that I use. Let me actually just jump back here and I'll show you. When I was teaching, let's see, what can I give you an example of? When I was teaching, well, Pesach, because we just did Pesach, right? And I wanted to talk about all the different steps in the Seder. So I just went into Canva and I just created all these silly little icons that I could pop up and we could use when we're learning about the different steps of the Seder. I love Shulchan Aruch up there. I could ask my students, do you prefer matzah or chametz? Which do you prefer better? These are all very simply made over in Canva. Another wonderful tool for creating graphics, surprisingly to me, is Keynote. I create all of my overlays in Keynote. Now, the key to creating any of these graphics or overlays, especially the overlays that are full screen, is making sure that you have cutouts for the things that you're going to put underneath. So, for example, right now, this sort of picture of me, this video of me, is inside this box because I was able in Keynote to just kind of cut this area out, create a transparent box so that I can then put my video in there. There's a lot more to get into about how to do that. It's relatively simple. In fact, I find it to be incredibly simple using Keynote or Canva. Really wonderful graphics tools. The last thing I want to share with you is two absolutely invaluable peripherals that I use every time I'm doing video production. And I've been meeting with a lot of synagogues and rabbis, and one of the concerns that I keep hearing is, how am I supposed to keep track of everything I have to do and still daven, right? And still lead services and still engage my students in teaching, whatever you're doing in this digital space. And the answer that I've given is that, yes, there is a lot of multitasking, but if you have the right tools, you can streamline your production. And I want to share 2 of them with you now. The first one is called a Stream Deck. A Stream Deck is an incredibly simple tool that pretty much does nothing on its own. It's just a series of buttons that you can program really right within the program. When I say the word program, you don't have to be a coder. You can program them to do pretty much anything. So I have a couple of Stream Decks that I use on my desk. One of them switches different scenes so that I can go from my main camera or over to my this view very simply. If I want to bring into a full screen with me down here, my camera isn't set up correctly. I'm doing this all through using this Stream Deck, which makes it just push button simple. I also can control Zoom using my Stream Deck. So I can mute myself. I can change from speaker view to grid view, which I found personally really important. If it, for whatever reason, defaults to speaker view, I always want to see everyone that I'm engaged with. And so I just have a button that I press and it immediately changes to speaker view. Raise my hand, open chat, all these things that I might have to otherwise fumble around with my mouse to find them on the Zoom window. I just have them as a button right on my Stream Deck. The other tool that I use absolutely nonstop is this Page Flip Firefly. This is nothing more than a basic Bluetooth input device. It's a pedal. And there are a million different versions of this type of thing. You don't need this one. I like this one, and I actually have mine right here. I've been using it because this is what I use to scroll through slides when I'm doing presentations. Hey, I see it, Brett. There you go. And the reason this is so important for me is that I'm a guitarist. And so when I'm leading services, I've got my scene changes, I'm playing guitar, I'm trying to engage my participants, and I need to advance the slides on my digital Siddur. Well, I don't have enough hands for all of that. And so I have this Bluetooth connected to my computer. I'm able to switch back and forth very easily just by pressing on the foot pedal. These 2 tools make the complexity, the potential complexity of producing something really, really high quality, it makes it not only possible, but really simple, push button simple. So let me take you behind the scenes a little bit and show you sort of what I'm looking at on my computer. So you should now be seeing my screen. Yeah, you are seeing my screen. Beautiful. So what you're looking at in the middle, that is my preview window. And by the way, I'm showing you Ecamm Live, but pretty much all of these tools, Ecamm Live, vMix, they all kind of work the same way. They'll have different components, but they all kind of work the same way. So I've got my window here, which shows me exactly what you all are seeing. On the left over there, sorry, I've got my list of scenes. And I've set up these scenes pretty much for everything that I might need. So for example, these are the scenes that I might use all the time. I've got my camera scene. I've got my picture-in-picture scene. I've got a wide shot for when I'm playing guitar, so my camera isn't zoomed in. You get the idea. I also have specific scenes for different programs that I do. So this, for example, is, now it doesn't look correct because I don't have the right PowerPoint brought up, but this is the scene that I use when I'm leading services. So I've got the kotel in the background, and actually if I open up, let me see if I can oh, I can't because I'm in presentation mode, but if I were to open up my Shabbat morning Siddur, my digital Siddur, you'd see that that it kind of blends right in because of, let me actually do that. Shabbat, here we go. And I'll see if I can get this to work. Let me play this here on the screen. Is it going to work? Will it work? Probably not. No, it's not going to work because I have it set up. I'm using a different scene and a different thingy-dingy. You get the idea. You can see that the background of my slides matches the background that I have here. You usually don't see all of that silly blue in the background. And then I can scroll through my Siddur as we're davening. I also have videos preloaded in here. So during my service, when we get to the Amidah, I like to give people a little quiet time, and then I just run into a video. And then I just run into a video during the Amidah, which kind of brings people back slowly from that quiet back into what I'm doing. So these are all of my scenes that I have set up. Underneath the scenes, I have a panel for overlays. So these are all the different things that you see that I can pop up on the screen. Sometimes I'll do check-ins with people. When I'm starting a class or a service, I'll say, hey, I want to know where you are. I want to know how you're doing today. Are you hineni? Are you aneni? Are you present? Do you have a question? Or are you eineni? Are you really not here? You're kind of not present and you need some time to get acclimated. These are all overlays, which all live here in my overlay window. You can see camera effects, so I can zoom in, I can zoom out. If I'm using a green screen, I can adjust all my picture settings. These are my sound levels, so the audio interface that I'm using. If I want to do any sound effects, I have those all here. Also, that's really, stop, it's okay. Thank you so much. As silly as sound effects are, by the way, there are times when they're really effective. So after I've given the best sermon of my life, very often the angels sing, and my congregation is just so moved they can't help themselves. Most of these programs also have ways for you to bring in other guests. So this is the interview feature over here. And then if you are streaming out, these are where comments and reactions will show up. I'm not going to teach you how to use this. I'm happy to do that privately with you. But this, I think it is an example of when of how using tools like video production tools, whether it be the simple ones like Prezi Video, or perhaps the more complicated ones like OBS or Ecamm, they can really up the production value of what you're offering. I just want to say one last thing, then I promise I'll stop talking and we can get to questions. But it is incorrect to think that you can simply turn on a camera and that the people at home will have a valuable experience. We cannot treat our digital participants as second-class citizens. We have to think of ways to not only engage those people who are present with us once we finally are able, please God, to reopen, but also to meaningfully really engage those who are with us digitally. And part of that is in the production quality that we produce for them. A lot of it has to do with the way we interact with them and the person-to-person engagement, being able to see them, being able to hear them, sharing their comments during the service, responding to their comments, having someone who's dedicated to working that Zoom room, having a digital pastor or a digital rabbi or cantor or something like that. But some of it does exist in the production value of what we put out there. I really don't buy into the myth. I'm calling it a myth. I really don't buy into the idea that we have Zoom fatigue. I think we have bad Zoom fatigue. We're all tired of really bad Zooms. We're all tired of really bad experiences. The antidote to that is not to stop streaming. The antidote is to learn how to up our game and produce better, more engaging, more meaningful Torah for the people who are participating with us digitally. So I will stop there and hand it back over to Leo, and we can jump into questions and anything else that people want to talk about.
That was absolutely brilliant. One of the things I found with a lot of places to say thank you is just to do that. It's hands like this. Congratulate, well done, David. And it's very visual on Zoom when you do that, and it's better than unmuting. You've unpacked a huge amount there. And we're going to go straight into questions, and then we're going to go from there. So I'm going to bring up the first question, which I have, which is coming from Michael Abrahamson. is there much difference between Ecamm Live and OBS other than the licensing costs? So I'll start with David, and anybody else can come in from the panel.
Well, I'm actually going to hand it off because I don't really use OBS. Leo, I think you use both, don't you? You use all of them.
Yeah. So Ecamm Live, OBS, vMix, what else? Wirecast. There are huge different ones out there for there. They all vary. Ecamm, as you've said already, is a Mac only version. Actually, one thing that I know that John is on here. John has got. You're running on Manycam. John, are you running on Manycam at the moment?
Yeah, I am at the moment. Yeah.
So he has that as his default. I don't know if you can show that or not. There is a difference in there. I would say that the top of the tree at the moment is vMix, and vMix, although it starts at £60, it goes right up to about $1,000 for the top one. And the top one, it does make a difference. John, did you want to come in on that?
Yeah. I mean, Manycam is. I haven't got anything set up on it, but I can easily share screens and bring line up films and movies as you did, and overlays and all sorts of things like that. And it's not expensive, and it's good. You can do transitions and cuts and things. It's good.
That is
John Eccleston.
Is Manycam on both? Is it Mac and PC?
Yeah, Manycam's on both. John Eccleston.
I was going to say there's another Mac only product called Mimo Live. Two brothers in Germany are the ones who make that. It is Mac only, but a very powerful tool, very much like Ecamm. And there's subtle differences in how you operate it. The Mimo Live is very much like a Photoshop motif. There's another one that just actually came out this week. They had an iPad version before, and this is Cinemaker Studio. And what makes this an interesting one, it is Mac only, but it lets you use your iPhones wirelessly as the camera. And it's a traditional 4-camera shooting with graphics and overlays and video. But for somebody who wants to get into this, low cost and easy to use, because you have iPhones, if you have a computer, you don't have to do cabling or wiring, and it lets you control the iPhones remotely. So you can actually sort of stick them somewhere and not have to have an operator. So if you haven't seen Cinemaker, that's a good one to take a look at. And David, hats off. I've been trying to explain what you've did in a concise, simple way. This was a classic explanation that everybody should see. And I think the point that you made about Zoom fatigue is really critical, because there was that Stanford article that talked about Zoom fatigue and looking your self in the camera, or the too much FaceTime. It's really just bad Zoom fatigue, and I'm going to use that phrase with some friends, because it's the audio quality. If you hear the people, and particularly when you're doing services, it's so crucial to be able to hear it. But hats off to your presentation.
Go back to David, and then we'll go to the next question. David.
Yeah, I just want to say I saw Cinemaker. I downloaded it immediately, and it didn't come out in time for me to include it here. But yeah, that looks like a really exciting option, particularly because I just saw a video the other day. Someone, forgive me, I don't remember who it was, did a really nice comparison video with a C920 webcam and a MacBook Pro webcam, and then an iPhone. And it's clear that the best camera you have, without having to purchase anything, is your iPhone camera, if that's, or your Android camera. But we're talking iPhone now, and so Cinemaker really capturing that and using that is such a powerful way to think about creating multiple views. And it's a really nice interface, simple, like you said, on the iPad, kind of simple, switching. Wait, there was something else I wanted to say, which I forgot.
We'll come back to you, David. Let's go on to the next question, and we'll come back to it. The next question comes from Sue Tepelensky. Has anyone used livestream.com Studio, and how does it compare with OBS? Anybody here? Brett.
So there's a lot of similarities. I want to see if I actually have it on this computer. There are a lot of similarities, the way that it deals with layering and things like that, the way that it pulls in camera signals, whether they're wired using SDI or HDMI, or whether you're pulling in like NDI type camera signals. And then on top of that, you can overlay text, you can choose graphics, you can set up all of those types of things. I find that Livestream Studio is very intuitive and easy to use. And sometimes OBS can not be as much.
If I remember rightly, was Livestream Studio was set up for gamers originally, wasn't it? Am I right? Or I got that wrong?
So they were using it, I think, originally in production studios for sporting events and for channels doing news. It's what most of the examples that they give are.
Okay. You've just muted yourself, Brett.
Because Livestream Studio is now part of the package that you get when you're doing Vimeo. Vimeo bought Livestream, so you get the studio as part of your package, and it's fairly.
You keep doing it, Brett. Keep doing it. I promise you, it's not me.
Oh, it wasn't me. I'm not muting myself.
No, it's I think.
Livestream Studio comes from Livestream Studio now comes with your Vimeo subscription if you have a professional account. So it's included and fairly easy to use. As you get into the more technical aspects of some of the streaming, whether it's overlays, whether it's graphics, whether it's anything like that, it can get complicated, but it's pretty intuitive. And
so we've got a ton of questions coming in. So we've got the people who are watching, please upvote the questions you want answered. The people answering the questions, we've got to keep them short. We're not going to get through all of these questions. The next question I have here on my list, and please upvote the ones you want answered. Could you, from Michael Abrahams, could you use Page Flip Firefly to mute, unmute a mic instead of changing slides? So that's to David and Brett, who've both got them.
You can use a Page Flip Firefly to do anything that has a key command, a shortcut. So anything that has a shortcut, my understanding is you can set it up to do that. I could be wrong about that. But...
No, I think it's fine. John Ittleson, you're on mute, John, and demonstrating a mute button, and you're on mute.
So I should be unmuted now. Yeah. So this is a little box. I got it on Etsy. It plugs into a empty keyboard slot, and now I'm unmuted. So this is really very helpful. This one's sort of clever. If I hold it down longer. Famous last words. It's supposed to mute my picture, but it didn't.
It does. It did do what it was supposed to do. Yeah, it did. But you're now gone. So I use for exactly the same thing. My Stream Deck, the bottom left button here is a mute. It's an unmute there, so I toggle it from there to there. Okay, moving on to the next question. We have Alicia Magal. How can we combine roamers and Zoomers once we start to have hybrid services? I'm trying to figure this out. Need a huge TV monitor in the sanctuary. David.
So I actually just posted on my website the beginnings of a guide about 3 different approaches to doing this. And I'll acknowledge up front that this is really hard. And yes, you would, if you truly want to engage the Zoomers in addition to the roomers, then yes, you will want to have a screen in your sanctuary. The leaders, the Shalich Tzibor, will want to have some sort of screen so they can see who's on. The biggest challenge, I think, when it comes to this kind of stuff is going to be the audio. Video is pretty easy, but the audio is going to be real challenging.
So we're going to cover the audio in a session in 2 weeks' time, but I'm going to move over to Marty.
Yeah, this is engagement between your 2 different congregations. As they're one congregation, but they're in two different places, and having them, interact with each other or acknowledge each other is a big part of it, and very important. And being able to see each other, acknowledge each other, goes a long way towards that. Now it gets complicated because you want to have a screen set up in the sanctuary so that they can see the Zoomers, and the Zoomers can see the people in the sanctuary by spinning your cameras around. But you don't want to necessarily leave that gallery view up on that screen all the time. It'll be distracting, and it doesn't advance the flow of the service. But those screens are hugely useful for other things during the service, like imagery and hymn lyrics, and announcements and psalms and reading passages. They can be used for a lot of creative things.
Moving on to John Ilton.
Yeah, I think this is an area where there's going to be a lot of growth and exploration. Think pre-COVID, if you had a face-to-face meeting and somebody came in with Zoom, they either were discounted or couldn't be heard or seen, or maybe you were in a conference room and the people came in remote and everyone was normal size except for this 6-foot picture at the front of the room. So I think how we do these hybrid events is going to be a time for exploration. And as Marty said, the screens in there provide a lot of visual content. I'm a university professor. I learned early on that if there's a television screen in the corner, even with snow on it, people's eyes will go to that. So really controlling where you have a person's attention and what's drawn to the screen is going to be critical in whatever you do within your services.
I think this is an absolutely vital point. Brett, did you want to come back on that one?
Yeah, so I'm going to talk next week a little bit about, it is next week, yeah? Next week, I'm going to talk about using screens and some of the things that you can do. But I think it's also going to depend on what your goals are. What objective are you trying to accomplish by having the interaction, and how does that look versus a service being more frontal with some options for people to be able to participate. Otherwise, you have to make choices. Can the person leading from the bima or from the altar be able to see the people at home and the people who are in the pews? But can the people in the pews also see the people at home? Are you using slides? Are you using any of that kind of stuff? And then there's the audio question, which we're going to tackle in a couple of weeks.
So before we go on to this, another example, the reason we're using Slido is exactly this reason. So I've just changed this Slido to now to be a word cloud, which we asked earlier for people to put in where they're attending or watching from. So if anybody who has joined us late puts in there, you will see this move dynamically. And the advantage of Slido is that everybody who is in the room and everybody who's remote have got an equal presence in Slido, so they can each vote on things. And we can have different types of questions. You're seeing it's real time. It's updating as we're doing it. And I'm going to put up another one to give you an example. I'm going to put up a multiple choice. We did ask this a couple of weeks ago, but I'm just going to put it up so you can see what actually happens. So this was a question about how many cameras do you currently have in your sanctuary? So I'll ask those people who are watching, you can see, my hands are off this. You're seeing the votes happening real time. So imagine now doing that in your sanctuary and your remote people asking questions about things or asking them that are relevant. Whether they're saying, you could be asking about yard sites to tell us what yard sites you've got coming up, but you could be asking some much more generic questions and things of what are you celebrating, what are you doing, even getting people to put up other things that are relevant. I will go over to David.
I think that the use of screens in our sanctuaries is going to be much less about seeing a grid view and much more about sharing liturgy or sharing tools like Leo just showed us. You know, another challenge will be if the people in this pews are using a siddur, a prayer book. What are the people at home using? Do we assume that they have a prayer book? Are we going to be showing them the liturgy as we have been on our screens? How are we going to sync those two up? If we move to visual tefillah, as the Reform movement calls it, where everyone is looking at the same slide, virtually and in person, that's a wonderful use of those screens. And then if someone is having an aliyah from at home, then you bring up their one picture for everyone to be able to see.
Okay, moving on. The next question we have is from Evan Schneider. Are there Zoom settings that can mess with audio quality? John Ittleson is the first
I'll
I see.
start with it. There are Zoom settings that help you enhance your audio. So the basic out of the box does echo canceling and tries to give the best voice communication. But Zoom has audio settings that let you get full fidelity and let your sound system control it. And this is really critical when you're doing music. But the issue there is Zoom can use all its special tools to make a conference sound good without feedback and echo. But you can get rid of all those tools and let your audio system provide that. And now I'm going to go to Marty because that's where he is. How do you get good audio? You can get audio as beautiful as classical FM radio, but you have to figure out how to do that with the gear and microphones that you have. And then Zoom doesn't do the echo canceling and the like, but gives you high quality audio.
Moving on to Marty in 1.5 minutes, Marty.
All right. Yeah, all of Zoom's controls, echo cancellation, noise reduction, and all that is really intended to enhance spoken voice for speech, especially when you're close to a microphone like all of us are here. But if you're looking to capture ambient sounds like that from a sanctuary, or especially if you're doing any kind of music, you really need to defeat all of those functions so that you can get a clear and pure audio path through Zoom. And yeah, there are a number of settings that you can find in your Zoom client just by, if you were to go to your mute where the microphone is, click that up arrow, and then go to audio settings. You can see a whole bunch of settings there, but there are a whole bunch more by logging into your web portal, to your web account on Zoom, and you can see many more audios. And if we're going to do a session on audio, then we'll cover all of that then.
We are going to do a session on audio, but one of the things I would make sure to say for definite is microphones and headphones. When you're going to hear it often, you're going to see it often when we talk about it. I'm going to just spotlight. You may have seen that we've got in here, we're running a meter, and this meter is telling us whether we are too hot or too quiet. It's amazing how many people do not realize that when they turn on their mics that they are either too hot or too quiet. We're aiming for around about 23 here, so I'm just peeking into the reds. I should actually bring it down a dB, which I can do on my thing, but I'm not going to touch it now. But it's critical that we that you sort that side out. Okay, moving on to the next question.
Leo, just so you know.
Okay, yeah, far away.
Did you want to?
This is exactly what I was going to say. So the biggest problem with audio is not you. It's when people are wearing headphones. You come back out of their headphones, out of their speakers, and this is exactly what's happening with David. So I'm coming out there.
I am wearing headphones, but there's something else.
There was a fault somewhere. Thank you. That's so disorientating. To hear yourself about a second later is so disorientating.
And the way that David had prevented that from happening was to engage echo cancellation. Now, that can alleviate the problem, but it doesn't fix the cause of the problem, which would take a little bit longer than we had before we were going on the air. So that was an effective way to fix it for now.
Okay, the next question we have is from Yuval Karen. How can we have face-to-face interaction with those joining us on Facebook and on YouTube? Marty, I'll start with Marty here.
That's a tough one because they're broadcasts. So David mentioned something, streaming versus meetings. And I would just rephrase that a little bit to broadcast versus multicast, right? Broadcast is like watching television. It's a one-way communication out visually and audibly, but there's no return from Facebook or from YouTube. In order to, and they're not sending video back, so the interaction between the two on that level is like very difficult.
So I'll come on this one. There's a number of things, one of which we demonstrated here earlier was Slido. We also use some other things where we put lower thirds on with people putting in comments, so we get comments to come back, even to the point that rabbis read the comments and put them up and just comment on people watching it. It all depends on what you're trying to deliver. A service in this current world and where we are is not the same as a service in the room. Also, a service in the room, you have to remember that up until a certain point in that service, it's very one directional. I mean, you may ask people to chant with you, but you don't actually ask them to come up on the bimah, or most of them to come up on the bimah and actually talk to you during the service. So, that happens afterwards. There are areas and rooms and other things that you have that happen afterwards, after a service, that maybe are more relevant to that. David, and then John Fiber.
Thank you for reframing that, Marty, as broadcast versus multicast. I've updated the slide. I just want to reiterate what Leo said. I hope that one of the things we learned from this is that not only do we have to offer good engagement for our digital participants, but we have to up our game in the way we engage our physical participants. And using Slido or other tools, again, let's put halachic issues aside for the moment. Let's put Jewish legal issues of using technology on Shabbat aside for the moment. I think that we can do a better job of creating engagement for our participants, whether they're in the room or not in the room. And the last thing I'll say about this is I really don't like broadcasting services to Facebook or YouTube, and here's why: because you, as the rabbi on the bimah or the leader, you don't really know if I'm there or not, especially if there are people in the room and you're focusing on them, and it doesn't really matter to you if I'm watching, because there's no real engagement, certainly not the face-to-face that you're mentioning. Whereas on Zoom, I can see you as the leader, I can see you, I can interact with you. Yes, there's chat on Facebook and YouTube, but it's difficult to facilitate that while you're doing a million other things. And I really think that the technology is important, but the engagement is so much more important.
John Fiber and then Marty.
I'll just quickly say that in our temple we use, remind me what it is, Leo, that brings all the social media comments into one place.
We use Restream Chat.
Restream Chat, yeah. And actually, although it's not a face-to-face thing, there's an awful lot of great stuff that comes out of that, of interaction with people watching and the rabbis. And I wouldn't sort of, it has a good value to our service, and everyone enjoys using it.
So when we're doing hybrid services versus virtual services, they're two different ways of thinking, two different workflows, two different processes. I know of congregations that are broadcasting their services on YouTube because they're entirely pre-recorded. And the way that they do interaction is through the chat on YouTube, which has been very, very successful and effective for them. And because everything is pre-recorded, that actually frees up the rabbi, the minister, the priest to interact as well in the chat on YouTube. Pre-recording also has the benefit of eliminating chance, luck, and opportunities for things to go wrong, except for the actual stream itself. All of the transitions, all of the elements, all the playbacks, they're all in, they're all done, put to bed. All you have to do is play the whole thing from end to end. But that's for virtual services. When we get to hybrid services, yep, that works completely differently.
I think there is this is a journey. We're going down it. There's going to be things that we're going to move, things that are going to work, things that are not going to work. There's no end goal here that's going to say this is the super solution and it's going to work. But these are really good questions. And thank you for the questions that are coming through. The next question that we have is Judy Kern. How do you overcome the stream delay for hybrid servers using YouTube? Brett.
So that was actually part of my comment to Yuval, right? So there's a delay when you stream. YouTube and Facebook both usually count anywhere from 20 seconds up to a minute in a delay. As far as overcoming it, it depends on what you mean. If you need people to write into the chat and say Shabbat Shalom or send in names for a Yartzeit or a Misha Berach, if you prepare asking them early enough to give yourself some time so that people can do it and not have to mess with the delay. If you're asking if you can overcome it to be in real time for everyone, the answer is not currently. Technology does not support it.
I think there's some interesting things we're doing. I mean, one of the things that we're looking at doing and going where David was talking about using virtual cameras, we're also looking at taking virtual streams of other things and putting them through to Zoom. Zoom is pretty cost effective. Sorry, that's the word I was looking for. Is cost effective to provide a solution and an environment. By the way, on one other thing, just to mention, Slido is going to be native in Zoom very soon. So you can actually, everything that I'm doing with Slido, they announced last year that it's supposed to be coming native sometime. John, did you want to come on that point? John Eccleston, and then Marty?
I was going to say, Slido is going to become native. You're going to see lots of things. The Cinemaker, when you load the Cinemaker director, Zoom is built into it. You just click on the Zoom there. I think we're going to see a lot of the tools that we're using third-party software for being embedded in Zoom. I mean, here, Zoom has the green screen background. So if I did this, I would be right on my way over to see you on the other side of the pond. And
we don't recognize that. None of us have been on one of those for too long.
Oh, but hopefully soon, right? Anyway, but things like Slido, I think for live interaction, Zoom was designed for that as a meeting. You could combine those creatively. Certain people could be in that live and you have that communications, and other people who may be watching it at a delay, they may engage through text or other things, and you can sort of adjust for the time delay. But if you need instantaneous, where I say something, we're not instantaneous. We're probably, 40, 50 milliseconds. Yeah,
milliseconds. Just to also clarify, we are, if anybody is putting in questions in Facebook and YouTube, I am watching them. We haven't had any questions in from that side at the moment, but thank you for the comments that are coming in from that side. John, so Marty, did you want to come on that point?
Yeah, just to mention that the latency delay that you get on YouTube is really only a problem if I could see two scenarios, but one is if you're streaming out to multiple platforms and you need those platforms to interact with each other, or you are interacting with each of those platforms and the delays are different. So that's two different scenarios: interaction between platforms, or you interacting with multiple platforms, right? And you really can't. There are some settings, and it's a trade-off between frame rate, resolution, and delay time, latency delay time. If you were to go up with a lower resolution video, it doesn't take as long to transport that and convert that and put it up there, so you can lower the latency delay on YouTube. But generally speaking, that may not be what you want to do. Generally speaking, is if you're going to have like question and answers, just build in time in your program that allows for that. Like ask the question, then have some things to say, and then you'll get your questions to come in.
Okay. The next question that we have here is from... I've gone and clicked on the wrong one. It's my fault. Let me just put it back in. It's great. You click on the tick. There's a tick and there's an up thing. Sue has come back and said, Zoom has polls and our older congregation can't use them. How do we get them to use Slido? Well, I think in my view, there are two sides to this thing. First of all, as I said earlier, that Slido will be coming into Zoom. A year ago, we were having our congregation can't use Zoom. If you went back 18 months or 2 years ago, it was our congregation can't join the live stream. I actually find it's amazing how adaptable people will be and can be, particularly when we're not in a rush. That's I think the biggest single thing is we've got to take this slowly. We don't have to have everybody answering every part of this and being a super wizard on this by the end of next week. One of the simplest things I find is this, and I'm going to talk and it's going to come to life, is a Facebook portal. The Facebook portal, which has Zoom built into it, has an amazing amount of power. It follows people around. They can sit on the sofa, they can move around the room, and it will actually follow them. It'll do everything for them, and it has voice control, and it is a really good thing for, I think it's around about $100. I think the Google have got a similar one out as well, and those tools will find the interaction that you want from people that are finding it difficult to do things. Anybody else on this point? David?
Yeah, I'll just throw in that I have those congregants also. I have those students also. And, we have to meet our participants where they are. And so in a class setting, if someone can't figure out the poll, then I just invite them to share their thought out loud. Or if they can do the chat, I ask, they can type their thought in the chat and then I share it for everyone else. So part of the challenge will be people learning how to use these tools, but another piece really does fall on us to meet our congregants where they are and what their capacity is.
You had a really interesting live video this week talking about that, David. You talked about a tool that you used and found you were friends with just yourself.
Right. So I did a video this week about, it's not about your tech, it's about theirs, because I finished a service and I wanted to find a space in which we could all meet more democratically, not boxed in Zoom, where one of those spaces like gather.town or spatial.chat, where people can actually move their icons around. And I invited everyone in, I had it all set up, and only to realize that the vast majority of my participants were participating on an iPad or a mobile device, and that none of these really work very well on mobile devices. And so a lot of them just couldn't get in.
I think we have to also, as I've said earlier, we have to remember we are literally a year from sort of the start of this going mainstream. And if you look at anything else when it went mainstream, you look at when TV started or radio or any other thing when it went mainstream, or some of us were involved in the internet bubble in the 90s. Look at what those websites look like today. It takes time before these things become. The internet was never going to work with dial-up modems. So we just have to wait for these things to catch up, and they are. I mean, in this conversation, you heard about 2 new platforms that are just launching into Zoom and giving areas in there. Okay, let me see if I can hit the right buttons this time. Yuval Karen, I find that mixing the online and on-site congregation, it's not the audio, but the latency that cause the problems. Is there a solution to this? Marty.
So if it's not the audio, but the latency, can I assume that we're talking about video latency? Or latency coming from Zoom participants? So my reaction or my first thought would be that either your network is not processing data as fast as it could, or your computer is not processing data as fast as it could. So processing power and speed is really important to, you want to minimize the latency, and the computers have to have the power, the CPU power and the graphics power to do that. and your network has to have the power to do that. So first rule of thumb, never ever use Wi-Fi for any kind of streaming. If you're streaming out or bringing streams back in, make sure you're on a wired connection. Make sure that your configuration of your router and switches are optimized for streaming. And that's something you may want to engage your IT people to help with, or bring in a professional if necessary. And make sure that you can actually look into Zoom if you were to open up one of your configurations, like open up the mute or the stop video and go to the tab called open up settings and go to a tab called statistics. You can actually see statistics on how well your computer is processing audio and video overall or individually, and you can see if your computer is being if you're asking too much of your computer.
So I just want to, Yuval's come back actually via YouTube to say it's video latency that he's talking about.
Latency, yeah.
Yeah. So, so I'm not sure if he's talking about latency between the sound and the actual picture that's going out, or he's talking about the latency of I'm sitting here. We've seen it. You see it when we're watching TV, and they put a wall of people up there, and the minute a goal is scored, they're all cheering about 3 seconds later. John Eddleton.
Yeah, I mean, I think everything Marty said really is the answer, but the question, is there a solution? We just have to be able to change physics.
We'll wait for the quantum
I think we're in the wrong group. Well, actually, we're more interested in changing
might be in the right group.
We might be in the right group to solve that problem. Okay. Moving on to the next question, again from Yuval. How do we access and use the audio meter when running Zoom? So very quickly, I will show you the one that we're running here, which is this one here. So we're using, this is a free Julian loudness meter. It is running on a separate PC, which is sitting over here to my right, to my left. That PC is running listening on there, and it's got OBS, which we were talking about earlier, using the virtual camera that David talked about. So it's listening out and it's bringing it in. It's quite straightforward setup. It does take a bit of time, but it's something that you would need a separate PC. I would argue would be the easier way. John Ittleson.
Because you're here today, if you go to meetingmeters.com and you put in your meeting link and you click on it, you'll see a Zoom site that has audio and video meters on it. It also gives you the opportunity to raise your resolution of your meeting to 720. It's a beta, but if you don't have the skill or the tools to put a meeting meter like Leo has done here, excuse me, then this is a way for you to check your audio beforehand. If you don't have any meters at all, Zoom lets you test your microphone by speaking into it and playing it back through your own speakers, and you can get a sense if your volume is about the same as the other people's volumes. And on that note, I'll stay here for a minute, but then I'm going to follow the law of physics, and I'm going to be out of sync and need to leave.
Thank you, John. Marty, quickly on this one.
All right. So one thing to note is you don't want to run that on the same computer that you're using to broadcast Zoom. It really needs to be run on a separate computer. Now, Leo, you're running one, but I'm also running one here on another computer, not the one that I'm on here. And they were both up on the screen. I don't know which one is showing right now, but you can have anybody on the call run a meter for you.
You're absolutely right, Marty. I've just realized that we're using your one and not my one. So now I'm running my one as well. Sorry. And now you can see the two running virtually identically. They, one is slightly ahead of the other. This always happens, but you can see the same waves happening on both of those. Thank you for that, Marty. That's a good point. Okay, so our next question comes from Master Plum. and she says, what is an example of when you would live stream into your Zoom meeting? David, Rabbi David.
All the time. So I assume you mean using a virtual camera, like I was showing.
Yeah.
I always use it for educational purposes, so that I can easily bring up text or overlays or things like that. If I'm just in a meeting, I'll use it oftentimes with something kind of a lower third on the bottom. I use it all the time.
I would absolutely agree. Take that further. One of the things that David was showing, and I've got an example to show you at the end of this. High quality production makes a huge difference. It makes a huge difference in the engagement, because we're getting to that point. I mean, I was watching an event last week, and it was streamed out, and it was in a Zoom call, and they then decided to have breakout rooms during the middle of it, and we were just sitting there watching for the best part of 20 minutes, one camera of which they were turning on and off and talking and this, and it's just not there. It's just not there. The great news with Zoom is it allows you to do these things. The bad news with Zoom is it allows you to do these things, and it's just knowing how to change and how to evolve. One of the things that John mentioned about the quality, this is going out in 1080p inside of Zoom. Anybody who's watching this in Zoom is watching this at the same high definition as you'd watch a TV that's down marked as HD. Out to YouTube, it's going out at 720p, but there is a way we can change that to a 1080. That makes a big difference when people are engaging and they're watching. The quality of it makes a big difference. But as we said earlier, the audio is the other side of that. Any more? I'll move on. Yeah, great. Thank you for that.
Leo, sorry.
Yeah, please come in.
Real quick, I just want to say that there is also a difference in quality between a virtual camera or any camera in Zoom and screen sharing. Zoom smushes down your camera, the amount of quality of your camera, but when you screen share, you get a much better quality because it assumes that you're looking at text. So for example, when I was doing the presentation, even when you were just looking at me, I was actually screen sharing. So I have my broadcast software, I'm outputting the video to another monitor, and I'm screen sharing that monitor so that what you're seeing in Zoom is going to be the highest quality video, the highest quality screen share. And that's an important piece to know about Zoom.
And I would just add really quickly, there is a setting in Zoom. If anybody's got two monitors, it is absolutely vital. Go in the general settings, click I'm using two monitors. It will change how you use Zoom overnight, because suddenly all your screen sharing won't suddenly remove everybody off the screen, so you can still see the gallery. It's a great feature to use that. Okay, moving on. The next question we've got, Andy Shaw says, hi, David. How long is it taking you to get to this level of production and find it simple?
Well, I guess since this all started, I mean, I really kind of dove into this back in September, October, even maybe before that, August, September. It's not simple. I spent an inordinate amount of time watching YouTube videos, learning about this stuff, and I love it, so that helps. But find the right tools, keep it simple. Remember why you're doing what you're doing. Fundamentally, it's not about the tech; it's about the Torah.
I'd just like to say I agree with that. I agree with that, and ask yourself the same question as we do for all these things. Do I need to do this? Why am I doing it? Do I need to have loads of things flashing on the screen all the time, or is that distracting? You have to ask yourself that, because just because you can doesn't mean you should.
I think it goes back to that age old of what it was like when Microsoft brought out clip art to be added into PowerPoint in the 80s and 90s, or 90s actually, and the fact that everybody was able to stick all of these things in didn't actually make a better PowerPoint presentation. Okay, The next question actually is from the panel, which is JLo. Can you talk more about virtual cameras? Are we covered enough on that, JLo, or do you want to bring that question forward?
I would love a little bit more on that.
Okay. To explain what they're doing, or can you clarify what you're after? Then we can cover.
So I guess it's the concept of what a virtual camera is. Is it just merely reflecting what you have on your end, David? And you need a virtual camera to get into Zoom? That would be my second question.
So for Ecamm, at least, I assume OBS is the same, and vMix. What's happening is it's basically routing whatever video I'm producing in Ecamm, it's routing that into Zoom, and it's creating a virtual camera. So there's not a real camera, it's a virtual camera. It's just taking the video and it's outputting it to Zoom, and Zoom is seeing it as if it were a webcam, as it were.
So to give a little bit of context, what happened is that I've been an Ecamm user for about 3 years, no, even longer, and the same on most of these other things. They didn't have virtual camera support this time last year. What ended up happening is the whole idea with Ecamm was to broadcast out, because you were in the room and you had 3 cameras and you were interviewing somebody and you had a desk here, etc., etc. So everything you were doing was pressing the stream button in Ecamm. Funny enough, I have not pressed the stream button in Ecamm in over a year. It feels very strange. It's there and the button hasn't been pressed. And exactly the same with OBS. OBS natively is a broadcasting tool with the idea that it broadcasts out. Then all of a sudden what we have is that OBS needs to support the ability to send to Zoom as the broadcast platform and other things, Teams as another example. And so they put in the feature of virtual cameras, and that's why it's come about. It's an addition, but there's now been a lot more where people have realized that there's virtual cameras that can add in there. Marty.
Yeah, just to add on to that was good. Just to add on to that. So all of these different pieces of software and streaming encoders, like Zoom is a streaming platform. It has an encoder, a software encoder that takes your video and streams it out over the internet through the computer. OBS is, and vMix and any other ones, these are software video switchers. So their intention is to bring camera video sources in from outside the device or the computer and manipulate them. And that's great as long as you're using an actual external camera. But what we're finding is that we have software products and PowerPoints and slides, things video sources that already exist within the computer that typically would only go out to a monitor, right, in a typical office workplace. But we need to reroute them inside the computer, inside software, to go into another piece of software like OBS, like vMix, like into Zoom. So there's outputs from these devices, and there's the inputs to these devices or softwares as well. And that's the concept of virtual cameras. It's not a physical camera. It is a video source that looks to the software like a camera.
Very quickly, David, and then I've got one other thing to cover on this. David.
Yeah, I just wanted to throw out there that virtual cameras do not always include audio. In fact, for Ecamm, they don't. So that virtual camera will send what you can see visually into Zoom, but getting audio there, if you're not just using one microphone, if you're using sound effects or music or anything like that, it's a whole other different problem.
Thank you. I was going to say that some of the stuff that Marty unpacked or started talking about there, Brett is going to be covering next week with Pro Producer, because there's a lot of that things when you're talking about sending to different screens and different requirements will all come up from there. But that's next week. The next question I have is from Evan Schneider. David, we found the opposite to be true. People like watching services on TV. We use Zoom for adult education programs, Torah study. Unpack that.
Yeah, I get it. So I don't want to make any presumptions about your community. So I'll speak about my own and my own role as a rabbi. I would say that the reason why, if my congregants like watching it on TV, that's because I've created a service which is a very passive experience. It's that they're used to just watching me in the sanctuary. That Jewish services have been likened to a big football game. You've got 50,000 people in the stand who really desperately need exercise, watching 50 people who really don't need exercise run around and get a lot of exercise. And in the sanctuary, you've got 200 people who really need spiritual exercise, watching 2 people who probably don't, because they do it every day, get lots of spiritual exercise. So you should do what's best for your community. For me, I'm always striving to create more engaging experiences, not just passive ones.
Yeah, Brett. You did have your hand
I
up?
would also say, no, I think it was actually the pedal. I was touching the pedal and I think it kept muting me. I wouldn't be careful. I would be cautious about saying that they're watching it on TV and that's their experience, because it's not necessarily how people watching see it, right? If they're engaging in the chat in any way, they feel like they're participating, and it doesn't matter whether you can see them or not. And so you have to ask the question, if they were in your sanctuary, would there actually be any interaction? Because otherwise it's comparing like the theater to TV. If they're not saying anything, if they're not doing anything besides sitting and standing, then the experience for them is not much changed, right? It's our experience of their experience that's changed.
I think there's I mean, from my own perspective, I think this isn't a binary issue. These a lot of the things that we're trying to talk about here are not binary issues. There's not a right and a wrong. I personally think that there is a huge that can be gained from engagement on Zoom, and obviously there's a massive draw to being in a synagogue. I also think that for some people that they are finding this experience on being able to watch on Facebook and listen on whatever they're used to is an experience that they're loving. And it may be something that we've got to work out, and we've got to say that's part of what we do, and it's maybe part of what we do and part of what we maintain. And that's the reason, the simplest example, that's the reason why when TV came out, radio didn't die, because some people like a different way. It's not always this is the only way we can do it and this is the only way we should do it. Okay, moving on to the next question. Isn't it great when you press the wrong button? How many times? Right, so we're getting close. I've got some other questions on social media as well, but I just want to finish these here. Alicia Magal, Siddur I found online is not the same as the printed prayer books we have. How to combine when people will be both in the sanctuary and Zooming from home? I can answer what the Reform are going to say, which is they've got a brand new Siddur coming out. But I'm going to ask what everybody else has any thoughts on this. David.
Well, I'll just share. I mean, the Reform movement has already the visual tefillah, which you can use. And yeah, if you're using, and I believe that the visual tefillah is lined up in some way with Mishkan Tefillah, the Reform prayer book. I could be wrong about that. I didn't know they have a new one coming out, which is really.
It may be just that there's a new one coming out in Jerusalem. The new one that's been produced by. This is. I could have talked. Give me 10 seconds and I'll remember. Go on, keep going. Sorry.
Yeah. So, but yeah, and I would argue that the wave. I'm not sure I would argue this. I think one option for the future is that we don't use necessarily printed Siddurim in the sanctuary, but again, we display the text that we're using, the Siddur, the liturgy that we're using on the wall, on the screen, on the TV, on the whatever, so that everyone is literally on the same page.
I think that when we combine also the fact that what we've just gone through, some of the people are saying, the other side of what we've happened with the pandemic is our global warming has reduced to some extent because we're traveling less. Do we really need to be printing these things out? I mean, how many times have we been sitting there where we print just this temporary pair book for tonight? We're going to print, how many people are coming? We're not really sure. So let's print double the number we think we're going to need. And then we'll just pulp the lot at the end of it. All of those sort of things. We just print this stuff and we're printing and printing and printing because we can. There's a couple of actual comments and answers that come here from other people on here. Our rabbi's made his own slides and he calls out the pages as necessary. Another one here from Michael Abrahams said, yes, making your own slides is probably the best way. That way you can remove any parts you don't use and add extra parts that are not in the Siddur. I think that's really interesting because while we typically have been we're doing service 1, service 2, service 3, whatever in rotation, very fixed. I actually think we're expanding really fast at the moment in what we do as liturgy, which has been stuck in sort of the 70s for a long time. David.
Yeah, imagine dynamic liturgy, right? That can change for any given Shabbat. And you can create your own, and you can create your own translations, and you can bring in your own artwork, your own whatever. I mean, it's a real opportunity, I think.
Okay. You had a quick point on that, J-Lo, on a more direct point.
Oh, I was just going to, Brett had said,
Brett, sorry, my fault.
Do you really want to touch a book that has been touched by many, many other people? You would have to disinfect it in between every service.
Interesting. The rules that have just come out in the UK for worship back in the room have actually said that you can't have shared elements in there, which has made a lot of problems. It's more have a lot of problems for Catholics because Eucharist, it just doesn't work and things like that. But we won't go into that. Okay. Marcia Plum has asked, what digital Siddur did you use? I think that's to David.
I made my own.
Simple. Marty?
Yeah, I don't know if there are copyright concerns. I know with many editions of of certain Bibles, there are copyright. You have to buy the rights to them, and they may not be easy to get. So doing your own, as David is doing, eliminates all of that uncertainty and expense and work.
Maybe, Brett, are you going to cover touch on this at all next week or things like that?
I am. I will now. Yeah. You're not actually prohibited from the text itself. It's the translation, and in some cases the transliteration that end up being copyrighted. But they're at least if you're
muted
touch
again.
that pedal again.
I'm not touching anything. I'm not moving.
I mean, I do have the ability to mute you, but I don't think I touched it. Go on. Sorry, go.
If you are using visual tefillah, or you're using any of the Siddurim from the conservative movement, you can get the licensing to deal with that, to overcome it. But if you have the time and want to do your own translation and create your own Siddur virtually like David did, you should. It really is the easiest way.
So we've had a similar question come in from Leah. I assume that's Rabbi Leah. How do you address the Siddur copyright issues? So I'm just going to answer really quickly. J license is out there, and if you're not, you should. Even if you don't think you should cover it anyway. It's there. In my experience, there's very, very similar things in other religions that cover that sort of licensing. Marty, you're on mute. You just went off mute and on mute. You're still on mute. It's not me. I promise you, it's not me.
I'm sorry.
There you're
I
off.
must have
There you're
just hit the wrong button. So I'm comes to mind that there might be an opportunity here, David, as long as you're creating these things, and other people who are equally as creative might make them available to other congregations that don't have these kinds of resources.
So it actually is available. If you, this is not a shameless plug. It probably is actually, but if you go to TorahTechGuy.com, I actually have my, I think I do. If not, I'll make sure it's there. My Shabbat Siddur, which is done in Keynote, available, and anyone can grab it.
We have 4 minutes left and 5 questions and some others. So I'm just going to go through these quickly. Some of this we've already covered. Judy Kern has said the URJ provided a digital flipbook of Mishkan Tefillah online for online use. I think virtually every different body brought out their own in some form or another, haven't they? So that's really good. Interestingly, I know that ours, Liberal Judaism, found that they didn't have the prints to some of their stuff originally, so they had to find them again when it all happened. You know, these things. Who keeps things like that? Question for you, Rabbi David: would you make a new scene in Ecamm?
That was before he actually said he was not going to be doing that. So
I mean,
you don't have to take the time.
It'll take me 10 seconds if you want to see it in action.
Oh, that would be great. That'd be cool.
Sure.
Thank you.
So,
as long as we have the time.
yep. So here you're looking at my full screen. I'm over in my scene setting. I'm just going to click on the plus button. That's going to automatically create a new scene. I can choose, I'll just call this example. I can choose up at the top here, do I want it to be a camera scene? Do I want it to be a screen share or a video? I'm going to actually just start with a blank back, and I'm going to bring in an overlay. So I'm going to go down to my overlays down here in the bottom corner, click on the plus button, and I'll just bring in an overlay that I have. So this is something I created over in Keynote. And then over, again, in my overlays, I'm going to bring in a camera overlay. So there whoops, sorry about that. So there I am. And I'll pull that over here. And in Ecamm, you can size it. You can also make it a different shape. I'm going to do a custom shape. That way I can make it kind of right in there. And then over here, I'll bring in another camera overlay, but I'll make this an NDI source. I think I can do that. I can. And I'll bring that in here. Let me again make this custom so that I can size it the way I want. And then the key to all of this is down here in my overlays. I'll bring it up here just so you can see a little better. I'm going to bring this frame up to the top. Now remember, I have these transparent cutouts in here. So when I bring that frame to the top, you could see that my camera, both cameras, this is not the right size because I didn't have it ready to go behind the frame so it looks all nice. And I've got a new scene.
Okay. I'm just going to unpin you. Right. Okay. Coming to the end of our questions, although I've got some others on the other side. Sabir Mayer is asking, I'm struggling to understand how much tech as a rabbi I need to master to do hybrid services efficiently and how much I can leave to a technician. So I'm comments here. Brett. Let's start with Brett.
I think it depends on your level of tech literacy to start with, and also what kind of support you have in your congregation. If you have people who can assist you, I would say that you should focus on leading the worship service as much as possible. If you are like David, and like I do sometimes, you can multitask to the point where you can change the slide and play the guitar and recite a prayer while also making sure that the chat box is being manned. Then all the power to you. But otherwise, you should probably have a good understanding of the tech or what's going on, but you don't necessarily need to do everything yourself.
John.
Yeah, I know we always say it, but if you've got, as Brett said, if you've got someone good in your community to help, then great. But don't try and do it all at once. Just introduce a new thing every couple of weeks, if you and practice. That's what I would say. Don't try and do
I think this is, to me, it's like learning to become a chef. You do not cook the whole dishes on the first week. You learn different parts of it until you can blend it together and to blend things and to move forward. And it is tough. I really do, Sabine, I feel this is a tough area for some certain people, but I'm also completely blown away about what I'm seeing over and over and over again, where people are doing it. If you're a huge mega synagogue like Central, who've got the resources and they have been doing this for a long time, they've been doing it for a long time. But everybody else is catching up really fast on this.
And they
David.
have like 9 technicians, and stuff.
Yes, but with the utmost respect to Central Synagogue, they have beautiful camera angles. But when I'm watching on YouTube or video, there's no engagement. No one knows if I'm there. No one cares if I'm there. So I think that we may need to start thinking, when we're thinking about how we staff our synagogues or our educational institutions, we might need to start thinking about, do we need to have on staff someone who can, again, not only do the tech piece of it, but do the engagement piece of it. But yeah, it's a heavy weight to carry.
Okay,
Sorry, Marty, and then we've got a couple of quick things. I had pressed the mute this time.
Yep. So during transitions from one camera to the next, or one part of a service to the next, there are a lot of things that need to happen all at the same time. Camera may need to move around to the next place. You want to do a transition from one camera to the next. You want to change your audio sources and check your levels. There are a certain number of things that you can automate, as David mentioned, using something like a Stream Deck, which is capable of doing multiple steps at the same time or in a quick sequence, right? After the push of a single button. But not everything is press and forget. Not everything is absolutely reliable to be in the same place every time. So there are things that you want human interaction to verify.
Okay, so last question in the box that we have here is, which is from Ivan again, doesn't OBS have a virtual camera built in now? Yes, this is the thing. It didn't actually have as a native thing a virtual camera built in. It only came in around about September or October, if I remember rightly. So it's amazing to see that everybody's talking about OBS as if it couldn't support streaming to Zoom natively this time last year. So that ends our questions on here. We've got a number of other questions which have come in on social media and some points here. So I'm just going to cover these really quickly and see where we can and answer the questions. First one is from a Facebook user. Hello from Totteridge, London. How can I cast from a laptop or iPad to a TV for better viewing at home? So Marty, then Brett, and then I've got a couple of comments quickly. Yeah.
It depends on the computer. Most laptops have an external video port. If it's a PC, if it's a Mac, it's got a Thunderbolt or a Lightning port, which can be adapted to have an HDMI output. And also provided that your television has an HDMI input. So if you can work through the connections that each of those devices have and make them compatible or adaptable, then it's very easy to do. HDMI can also carry the audio through your TV, or you can find another path that goes from your computer to your amplifier or something like that. But HDMI works well.
Brett.
So it depends what you're talking about as far as casting. If you're using Zoom, it's a little bit different. You would probably be best to use the suggestion that Marty just made. For one of the major streaming services, though, Facebook, YouTube, Vimeo, Twitch, Instagram, all of them now have built in both either AirPlay or at least Google Cast. So you can cast from whatever device you're on to any kind of smart TV or smart device, whether it's a Roku or a Fire Stick or anything like that.
Yeah, there's actually been a clarification. It says I'm using Chromecast, not cable. And I would say the interesting thing is Chromecasts and everything like that have changed quite dramatically over the period of time. An old one that's a few years old isn't that useful anymore, and they're normally around about $30. You may find that a new version of that, the new Chromecast, a new Fire Stick, do everything that you are missing in the old one. But to my knowledge, does anybody know how to cast over Zoom onto there? JLo?
So I must have had an old Chromecast. In the Google Verse, I've been using the same Chromecast stick in my TV for 7 or 8 years now. I was never able to figure out a way to Chromecast from Zoom, but you can Chromecast from Facebook. So if you watch the stream, you can Chromecast to your larger TV that way. That was my workaround.
The new ones are they have literally the same with the Fire Sticks. They come out with them so often. I'm not sure about how to Chromecast to Zoom. Brett?
I don't think you can.
So Zoom doesn't support it natively, but depending on what you're using, either on an Apple device or a PC, you can essentially configure your Chromecast as an external display and set it up as a second display, and then choose that you only want to cast the Zoom
the
application
window.
instead of your entire desktop. It's not the best quality, but it's definitely doable.
Okay, next question we have on here from Jeffrey Fox. I wonder if folks on this call have any thoughts about hybrid adult education and what tech you might use to optimize that experience. That's a big question. Anybody quickly on there?
Well, the OWL, which is a device, I think it's called the OWL, isn't it? That sits. If it depends on how big, but
it's an OWL. It sits there. It's got four cameras on the top.
Yeah, and you can have people. You use it as a one camera for Zoom, and whenever someone in the room is talking, the microphone picks up where they are and pans round to them. But they're quite expensive, but they're one way of doing it.
It also
there's a
works
follow-up
best
question.
on a square or round table. It doesn't work well on a rectangular table.
No, it's true. Yeah.
There's a follow-up question also from Jeffrey. Looking for a whiteboard that I can share into Zoom meeting and write live on a classroom. I'd say the best thing for this is to watch. There's been a couple of episodes of Office Hours where they've been demonstrating this. It's unbelievable what you can actually do now by putting it in. But what they're using is an A10 Mini, and they're keying it back in with some software. David,
you mean writing on the screen? Is that what you're talking about, Leo? Yeah.
Yeah. Literally, I can't do it. Can you do it? Can you write on your overlay onto what you're doing there?
I can bring it up. Let's see if I can get this working. Right on iPad. Hold on a second. I know I disappeared. There I'm back.
There you go.
Yeah. So all I'm doing here is I've got an iPad connected with a green background, and then I have that again. Think about layers, right? I have that on top, and I have that keyed out, so green screened. And although I just noticed my video is reversed, sorry about that. And then I'm on top of it. So
it's not reversed to us.
No, So in any case,
but if you look at that and you sit there and you think about the engagement factor of being able to do that is just, particularly in education, that's it. You're in the room. You're in the room, and you don't need to be. You're looking at one place. It's excellent. So there you go.
I will say, Leo, that I teach for a large adult ed organization down here in South Florida, and we actually decided that we're going to keep all of our regular classes. We're going to stay digital, and we're going to create moments throughout the year when we will all come together, because of course that's valuable and meaningful. But it's so much easier for people to connect. People could take more classes. We can get better teachers. So we're going to be staying digital for adult education, except for moments that we create to be all together.
So a couple of these are little comments. They were clarifications. We already talked about. Yuval Karen was saying about the video latency. He also said it's when they can see the rabbi on site and in the screen. That's a problem. If you're in the room and you've got the solution to fixing that is that the latency or the video that you send to the room has to come from the room. And the way you do that is that you, with OBS or with other things, they have camera outputs. We could talk about vMix in particular ends up with, you can have multiple outputs, so you can choose the elements that you put in the room. And that's where it gets to the $900 version does all of that. And it's hugely impressive. Isn't it great when people correct you? When you say something and they correct you, right? Yeah, absolutely. For all the people, I am wrong. The new Siddur that's coming out is from the World Union. It's actually from IMPJ, the Israel Movement for Progressive Judaism. It's Dalia Marks, Rabbi Dalia Marks. She has produced a new Siddur and it's due out anytime now. So yes, all of the people that have told me I've got it wrong, you're right. It's great. Thank you. And that's that. A couple of people saying they've been screen sharing for 3 different Siddurim for Shabbat, and they don't know what they're going to do when they go back to printing it in the real world. It's going to be a difficult call for that. And I think that has covered all of our questions. The last thing I wanted to do really quickly is just show you something which I'm hoping before my Mac finally dies, which I think it is to just show you something that we talk about the engagement and just give you about a minute and a half of Havdalah that we did last night to show you what you can get delivered when you do have both high quality video, high quality audio, engagement online, people remotely. So I'm just going to show this really quickly before we finish up. And I'm hoping this is going to work. And that was from yesterday, from Jerusalem, as you can see. It was all shot live and streamed for our Zanu's event with URJ. When you get great cameras and you get great audio and you're not out of sync like I am, it sounds absolutely wonderful. It carried on, and then they had other people come in as remote guests. It's just a great experience. You can do these things and you can bring people in. Thank you everybody for watching. Thank you for everybody on the live stream. Thank you to our panelists, to David, to Marty, to Joe, to JLo, to Brett, to Jonathan, to others that have come in and dropped out. We really appreciate you're here. If you have other questions, we'll be back next week with another session. Next week's session is going to be led by Brett, talking about ProPresenter, and then from ProPresenter where that leads on to all the other things that you could be putting on the screen, which you could be putting there, how you deal with all your liturgy and all those sort of things. So until then, we will see you then. If you're in the live event, please join us in the after show link. You've been sent that in Zoom. So I